Hello friends, I have not done a video about extreme hunger for a while, so I am going to be talking to you today about some of the things that my recovered self would say to my recovering self all around the topic of extreme hunger. Now, I am sharing this, of course, from the perspective of my own lived experience with extreme hunger whilst I was in recovery from a restrictive eating disorder. So, as I always say, please recognise everybody's journey is unique and individual. And whilst there is, of course, shared experience, that is the very reason channels like this can be so supportive and is the very reason why I have chosen to share. Please do take what helps and leave the rest. Focus on your path, your plate, your journey. So, with that said, let's jump in. The first thing I would go back and say to myself is that extreme hunger is normal. And I would say that 1,000,000 times over to myself to reassure and to reaffirm the fact that extreme hunger, feast eating, post-starvation hyperphagia, whatever you want to call it, basically eating lots of food in the recovery process, the refeeding process from a restrictive eating disorder is normal. And I would remind myself that actually what is extreme is the damage that has gone on due to restriction to create the demand and the debt with which my body then needs to repair and refeed and heal. That actually the eating is normal and natural. It is the restriction that was extreme and shocking and devastating. And I would say that to myself, as I say, 1,000,000 times over, because it was something that I remember having huge uncertainty around, huge uncertainty. And I would really want to ground my recovering self in the reality that it is normal and natural as a part of the process of recovery. The second thing I would go back and tell my recovering self is that it won't last forever. I absolutely remember in my journey being incredibly concerned that actually my extreme hunger was just going to go on forever and ever and ever, and that I was never going to feel normal around food again, and that I was never going to eat in a normal way again, and I was always going to feel totally out of control, particularly around foods like cakes and biscuits and sweets and chocolate. I remember feeling this deep sense of dread that actually what might be true for other people wasn't going to be true for me. And I would now absolutely go back to that me and hug her and look her straight in the eye and say, lean into this. Lean into this hunger. This is healing hunger. And that the only way out of it is through. To trust my body, to lean into that hunger and to know that it will not last forever. I would want to tell that me that it is because that me was doing the eating. It was because that me was eating every single biscuit in sight and really honouring every dot of that mental and physical hunger. Because of that, recovered me is able to be totally normal and natural and at peace and free around food. I can honour my hunger without any restriction, but I also feel this deep sense of peace and contentment, and actually I can just go out and eat meals and have social time, and I can sit and graze on biscuits and then just get lost in conversation and forget that they're even there, and I can be at the cinema and get so lost in the film that I'm just like, and forget to eat my popcorn and my sweets. I would remind that recovering me that it's only possible to get to this place if you allow yourself to go through that hunger and honour it. And I would remind myself of that concept of the pendulum. I would say at the end of the day, in order to be able to get back to that middle place where there is true intuitive balance, where your body does ask for all spectrum of things, and it asks for biscuits and cakes, but it asks for them in an amount that actually it says, that's lovely, I'd like that. And then it goes, I'm satisfied, thank you very much. And you can just move on with your day, and it's simple and it's easy. I'd remind myself that to get back to that place, you have to allow that pendulum to swing in the other direction. I would go back and remind myself that I am not the exception. that my body is not the one body that will just eat and eat and eat and eat forever and gain weight forever and ever and ever and ever, and that it will never stop. I would remind myself that actually what is true for all bodies includes my body, and that this is part of the recovering process, a biological healing process from an energy deprived state. And that yes, it is scary, and yes, that fear can dress up in all sorts of different outfits, and sometimes it comes knocking as boredom, and sometimes it comes knocking as I've turned into a binge eater, and sometimes it comes knocking as this will never end, and it comes knocking as you'll never be able to do the things you want to do, and it comes dressed in all sorts of different outfits and costumes. But at the end of the day, the truth is that I am not the exception, that the only way out is through, and that it will be okay. Oh, this is an important one. I would go back and tell myself that it is okay to be enjoying aspects, parts, chunks of this process. I think this was something that recovering me struggled a lot with. Yes, of course, there was all of the fear and the challenge and the guilt and the this and the that. But I also absolutely, lots of the time in my recovery, had a deep sense of joy and excitement and that I was doing the eating that I deep down desperately wanted to be doing. And I felt huge conflict with this. I felt it was in conflict with what I would see and read and hear about going through the recovery journey. And my eating disorder would absolutely jump on this and try and paint all sorts of pictures about the validity of my struggles, the validity of my eating disorder, the necessity of honouring my hunger, etc., etc., etc. And recovered me would go back to that recovering me and say very firmly, it is absolutely okay for you to enjoy doing what your body needs you to be doing to heal. It's the most normal and natural thing in the world for there to be a sense of peace and contentment and pleasure and comfort from doing what your body deeply needs you to be doing. In the same way that resting when your body is tired feels good. It's no different here with the eating. Doing what your body needs you to do in recovery, be that the eating, be that the resting. It is normal for it to feel good on some level. And this is not to say that it isn't true that there can be all of the negative stuff coming up as well. Absolutely, that's part of the process. And it is also normal for that to be there and for it to feel hard and challenging and guilty and itchy and scratchy and but it's also, I would go back and tell myself it is absolutely okay and normal and natural for it to feel good, because now, recovered, I look back on that time in my life with such compassion and such clarity that of course it felt good. My body was hungry, body was tired. Eating lots of food and resting felt good because it was what my body on a deep level wanted to be doing. So I would go back and I would tell myself that so firmly. Another thing I would go back and tell my recovering self is that the journey I was on and the honouring of my extreme hunger was not simply about weight restoration, but about full nutritional rehabilitation. The journey I was on, the destination I wanted to get to, was a place where I was fully mentally and physically healed. And that required me to allow my body to do all the healing that it needed to do. And therefore, slamming the brakes on at a point where I decided, or where somebody external told me that my body was in a place that they deemed to be where it needed to be, or me pulling back on the reins where there was that fear and lack of sense of trust in my body's ability to sort out its weight. These were things that were just going to keep me stuck inside the eating disorder. And so I really would go back and remind myself of the need to be leaning into and honouring all of that hunger, every single bit of it, regardless of where my body was in that moment. I would remind myself of that house renovation analogy, that the actual normal trajectory of physical healing and recovery involves a prioritizing of weight restoration initially to enable the body to get to a place where it's able to do more of that healing. And so I would remind myself that the extreme hunger I was experiencing was a reflection of the fact that, okay, maybe some progress had been made on the external renovations, but internally there was a huge amount of work that still needed to be done. And I would very firmly tell myself that if I wanted to be free and healed, I had to allow my body to do what it needed to do to fully heal, restore, repair, and recover. This one's probably pretty obvious, but it is something I would go back and remind myself of. I would go back and remind my recovering self that honoring extreme hunger does mean eating a lot of food and that that is completely okay. I'd reassure her that it's okay for it to be chaotic and messy. I'd reassure her that there is no too much. I'd reassure her that yes, honoring extreme hunger is going to mean eating a lot more than eating disorder is approving of or comfortable with, but it's also going to mean eating a lot more food than she even thinks is possible. I'd remind her that it's absolutely okay that the vast majority of that extreme hunger is being directed towards sweet foods. And I'd reassure her of the reality that recovery eating is not meant to look or feel normal. That recovery eating is healing eating, it's restorative eating. And I'd remind her that there is no too much. This one is so important. I would go back to my recovering self. I would take her by the shoulders and I would shake her and also hug her to death and say, you can trust your body. You can trust it. You can lean in, you can listen. You can focus on your brain and your behavior and the opposite actions you need to take and the walking into fear. And you can trust your body to do what it needs to do and to ask for what it needs in order to be able to heal. And you can trust your body that it knows what it's doing with the food that it's asking for. I would, as I say, shake my recovering self's shoulders whilst also giving her the biggest, firmest hug ever. And I would say, you can trust your body. Your body is on your side and your hunger is not the enemy. And finally, I would go back to my recovering self who was going through extreme hunger, and I would sit down and say to her that me now, recovered, is so deeply grateful to the me who just kept on going, who leant into when it felt good and who pushed hard through the bits where it did not, who trudged and skipped and jumped and shimmied, who listened and leant in and trusted, and when I didn't trust, acted like I trusted. I would say to that me how immensely grateful I am to her for keeping on going, one foot in front of the other. And I would be reminding her of the fact that her future self is so grateful, so immensely grateful for the hard work that she's choosing to put in right now. And I would remind her so hard that every single step of the struggle is worth it. The fight is worth the freedom. So I hope that this video has been helpful. It's been really good actually to come on and share these, and I'm thinking I might do some more videos a bit like this of me going back and imagining what I'd say to my recovering self on various different topics. If you've got any topics that you'd like to hear these from, then please do let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support and your love of this channel. It means the world to me. I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you're having a wonderful day. Until the next time, goodbye.